Right, let's jump straight into this explainer. If you're prepping for your CBSE Class 10 English exams, you are in exactly the right spot. We're going to elevate your understanding of Adrienne Rich's The Trees from a basic ecological reading to a deep, board exam-ready literary analysis. We'll be breaking down the layers of this fascinating poem, moving way beyond what's just on the surface.
Listen to this incredibly eerie prophetic line from the poem. The forest that was empty all these days will be full of trees by morning. It instantly pulls us into this mysterious nocturnal mood, doesn't it? Just reading that, you can literally feel the anticipation. It sets up an immediate tension between a really unnatural emptiness and an inevitable, powerful return to the wild.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. The voice of emancipation. 2. Decoding the dual setting. 3. The nocturnal rebellion. 4. Mastering poetic devices. And finally, 5. Acing the board exam. Let's get to it.
Part 1. The Voice of Emancipation, Adrienne Rich. Now, what's truly fascinating about this poem is how deeply it's tied to its author. You honestly cannot separate the trees from the woman who wrote it.
Rich wasn't just a poet. She was a highly influential American essayist and a radical feminist activist. The source material points out that she used her poetry to really put historical constructs under a microscope, impartially dissecting things like patriarchy, militarism, and systemic confinement. Since this poem was published in 1963, right during the budding second-wave feminist movement, it is deeply rooted in that social mission. Understanding this background is an absolutely crucial insight for scoring top literary marks, because it frames everything that happens next in the text. Moving on to Part 2, Decoding the Dual Setting, House versus Forest. Let's see how Adrienne's background actually shapes the physical environment of the poem, which operates on two entirely different levels.
On the surface level, there's this brilliant contrast between two very different spaces. On one hand, you've got the house, this space of strict confinement built with artificial human boundaries, glass panes, concrete veranda floors. And on the other hand, there's the forest, representing pure freedom and the tree's authentic ancestral habitat. The forest has been totally empty, just waiting to be restored with life and equilibrium.
This sets up our dual lens perfectly. Literally, we're watching an ecological rebellion. It's a story of domestic plants breaking out of a household, which really highlights nature's unstoppable resilience against human exploitation. But figuratively, it's an extended feminist allegory. It represents women leaving those private, patriarchal cages they were historically confined to and marching out into public sectors to reclaim their social agency.
To push this double narrative forward, the poem relies on two active forces. First, the trees themselves. They symbolize those oppressed groups, specifically women, silently mustering their collective strength. Then, we have the speaker. She's this quiet, observing woman writing letters inside the room. Her silent witness reflects a deep solidarity and the slow dawn of realization as this massive shift happens right in front of her.
Section 3. The Nocturnal Rebellion, a Silent Revolution. The real key here is how this incredible escape actually unfolds under the cover of darkness.
Rich structures this breakout in 4 distinct stages across the stanzas, and she brilliantly shifts the tone from quiet and tense to absolutely triumphant. We go from a sterile void straight into the actual nocturnal rebellion, then we see the detached chronicler, and we end with the explosive climax of liberty. In the first couple of stanzas, we find out the forest is completely dead right now. No birds, no insects, just the beating sun. But overnight, the roots start working non-stop to pry themselves out of the concrete cracks. And what's really captivating here is Rich's analogy. She compares the cramped branches shuffling under the low roof to newly discharged patients walking half-dazed and weak, yet deeply excited towards the clinic doors to breathe fresh air. It perfectly captures that transition from sickness and confinement straight into healing and freedom. Then, as we hit stanzas 3 and 4, we see this detached speaker writing long letters, barely even mentioning the historic exodus happening all around her. This actually highlights a really profound point. Massive social shifts often happen silently, without any big fanfare. But then, the tension shatters. The short, dramatic sentence, "Listen, the glass is breaking," signals the collapse of those artificial walls. The wild winds rush in to embrace the liberated trees, and nature crowns itself supreme under a shattered moon. It is a completely victorious tone.
Part 4. Mastering Poetic Devices and Poem Mechanics. Getting the story is great, but to really master this poem and impress your examiners, we need to look under the hood at how Rich builds this atmosphere.
Think of these poetic devices as your ultimate master toolkit. Notice how Rich elevates nature to a conscious character, using personification, like when the winds rush to meet them. Nature is actively helping the escape. We just talked about that brilliant simile of the newly discharged patients, right? But also look at enjambment. That's the continuous run-on lines across the stanzas without any punctuation breaks. This is a very deliberate choice. It perfectly mirrors the unstoppable, continuous momentum of the rebellion itself. The structure of the poem is literally acting out its meaning.
And finally, Section 5, Acing the Board Exam, High-Scoring Prep. Let's take all this rich analysis and translate it into actionable prep to secure those top marks. So if you get an extract-based question asking about specific word choices, like why she used the word stumbling instead of marching, here is the key nuance you need to explain. Stumbling reveals that the journey to freedom is clumsy and unpracticed. These trees, or these confined individuals, have been locked up for so long they don't quite know how to walk properly yet. But despite being unpracticed, they are fiercely determined. It's a much more powerful, realistic word than a simple, organized march.
Now, for those higher-order thinking tasks, you might have to compare text from across your syllabus. Let's say you're comparing the trees to the poem Amanda. Notice how Amanda is looking for an internal, psychological escape. She retreats into our imagination, pretending to be a mermaid or an orphan, just to hide from constant nagging. In stark contrast, Rich's trees perform a physical, collective, and outward rebellion to reclaim their actual space in the real world. Both deal with a loss of autonomy for sure, but their methods of dealing with it are entirely opposite.
And if you're tackling a long answer question, you absolutely must sprinkle in specific academic keywords. It instantly signals to the examiner that you grasp the complex layers of the text. Drop emancipation instead of just saying freedom. Use ecological imperialism to describe human control over wild nature for, cosmetic interiors. And use subjugation to describe the act of keeping something under complete control. These terms prove you understand both the ecological and the sociological depths of the poem. Ultimately, whether you read this poem as a call for planetary healing or as a fierce anthem for feminist liberation, the philosophical core is exactly the same. So I want to leave you with this final thought drawn from our analysis today. Considering the unstoppable force of nature and the human spirit is